Blaze Rock. One I didn't know about was Catherine Gibbons, who is a descendant through her mother, and I can't tell you the line. She says it's through the Rogers and then the Phipps. And we don't have that line exactly figured out, at least I know.
It's in the Clays.
The Clays. Her mother was a slave. Yeah. So it's through that line. But we also have Olivia Anderson, a descendant from Thomas Amy, and she is from the son James Amy. Her mother was an Amy. And Olivia. And Daphne, her husband, is with her. We have Priscilla Rogers. And Melissa Rogers Jesse. We got, we were supposed to have Jenny Rogers, who's James Leftwich Rogers' son, and he didn't make it back in time. They were coming from an airport. But these girls are descended from Thomas Amy Rogers, next to James Leftwich and their family. Rogie Feber, Rogie is Roger Sprinkle. She also comes from Thomas Amy Rogers, but she's from a different child down the line a little bit. But they're like second cousins, I think. Yeah. And they have been mostly responsible for the displays that you see across the hall, pictures and the things. Donna Gray brought pictures of the grave that she had a big part in cleaning the graves over in the Rogers Cemetery. We don't have Wendy Jacobs. We have a husband. We're going to hear from him in a minute. Wendy is descended from Thomas Amy through his oldest daughter, Tabitha. And as I understand it, Wendy is the fifth great-granddaughter of Thomas. So she's got a line back. We also have an associate member, a lady that lives in Corpus Christi, Texas. Her name is Mary Dunham. I don't know her, but she's descended from Thomas Amy through the Rogers, but through a different child, John Alexander Rogers. And she contacted us as soon as she heard there was going to be a chapter here. She contacted us and said, I want to be an associate member. She's also kin to the William Cock that was in this area, and he is a patriot. So we've got several amongst us who have a direct contact with Thomas Amy, and probably some that have an indirect contact that we haven't figured out yet. Anyway, we are tickled tonight to have Jake Jacobs with us. And Jake, as you know, probably know, lives in the Amy house out in Bureau. He's been very generous to let people come to the property, tour the house, tour the property, share the history, and he's been a real asset to this county. And Jake's going to tell us more about things that Thomas did, tell us about living in the house and on the land, and give us a little more history of the Amy family. Jake.
I hope I don't make mistakes. I'm going to wander around and talk because I talk better on my feet. Thomas Amy was a French Huguenot. I assume everybody knows what a Huguenot is. A French Protestant. In the 1600s, the king and the pope decided that everybody in France had to be Catholic. And so those that were Protestants at the time, a la Luther, Calvin, that genre, they said, what are we going to do? And the king said, well, either you renounce your Protestantship and go back to Catholicism, or you exit. And so there was a mass migration at that time, roughly in the mid-1600s. That's when the Ami family made their, around here they say Amos. A lot of the descendants call themselves Amos, which is natural. That's the English version of it. But it is technically Ami. Ami, my friend. And we kind of changed that a little bit to say Amy as opposed to Ami. But that's the correct derivative of the name. Thomas Ami was born in Virginia in 1744. His family, all of the Huguenots' families, were basically in one area of Virginia when they came over off the boat and got off the boat, and they were directed to an area called Monacan in Virginia, and that was 250,000 acres set aside just for French Huguenots. Most of the ethnic groups that migrated at that time sought their ethnicity, and they would go to those areas where they primarily were. And so most of the French Huguenots ended up in Monacan, and then eventually spread from there. By 1770, Thomas Ami, at the ripe old age of 19, 44 to 76, 17, at that time he had migrated from Virginia down to North Carolina. Well, actually, his father had a plantation in North Carolina, and then when his father's died, William's older brother, Thomas's older brother, William, inherited the plantation from his father, and Thomas got some money, and so he went to North Carolina, down on the Lumber River, on the North-South Carolina line, and he bought some property there and started his own farm plantation there. We were fortunate, shortly after we got here, we were invited to Pine Bluff, North Carolina by the DAR, if you will. They had got permission for us to get onto the old property, and so we have pictures of my wife standing on the old stone ruins of the dam in the mill there in Pine Bluff, North Carolina, where he lived at the time. And that's where he was with his plantation when the Revolutionary War ensued. Being fierce patriots, and I was visiting with Jeff Bobo earlier, who is a French Huguenot, whose ancestry were very synonymous with Thomas Ami's family, roughly in the same areas at the same time. But the French Huguenots were fierce patriots because they'd already been kicked out of one country, and they didn't want to get kicked out of another. So they took up the cross immediately, and Thomas joined with a Colonel Caswell in the newly formed North Carolina 3rd Regiment, and fought several battles, the Battle of Moores Creek Bridge, and several things like that. Well, then Caswell ends up becoming governor, and he recognized Tom's talents and had him appointed as the Commissary General for the Wilmington District of the Continental Army. So he was in charge of everything, the shoelaces to the bullets, for the Wilmington District of the Continental Army. Quite an undertaking. He had no money. He mortgaged his own farm in Bladen County to buy goods for the war. That's patriotism. We do the same thing, except they don't ask us. But anyway, that's the kind of people who settle this country. Can you imagine being dumped off in the wilderness of North Carolina no roads, hostiles, with 50 mouths to feed. Your responsibility. That's what happened in 1780 when Thomas and me landed here. Apparently, he and Caswell, I sit in my house, in the living room, in the quiet, and I listen. I want to hear them talking. I want to hear Ami and Jackson and Savier. By the way, another French Huguenot is a fellow by the name of John Savier. They call him Severe. He and Thomas A. were dear friends, very close friends. In fact, Savier was the governor of the ill-fated state of Franklin. I'll tell you more about that. We'll get there in a little bit. But anyway, I could talk for hours. I have been spending the last several days going back and rereading, and it's amazing what my wife and I have stored on our computer. I've started printing them all off just in case. But we have so much information on Thomas Ami and all of the people that he was associated with. If you were coming to this part of the world in 1780, you came through Ami. Only one road. One road came from Philadelphia to Roanoke to Abingdon, where it picked up what was called the Indian Warpath, or the Warrior Trail. That's all the roads back then were improved Indian trails. Picked up the Warrior Trail and followed it from Abingdon to Bluntfield, and from Bluntfield into Long Island, which is now Kingsport. And then the road followed, or the trail, if you will, barely a road, followed the Holston River down, roughly the old stage road route, followed it down, rounded the bluff right across from my house, and hit Big Creek and stopped into the road. So in 1780, if you came in a wagon, there's a story about Thomas and me and wagons. A lady was trying to sell him this wagon, her wagon. He said, ma'am, he said, I don't need, I've got wagons stacked up. But you had to leave your wagon over there if you were coming into the wilderness, because there were no roads. The first road into the wilderness, you can still see the ruts behind my restaurant at the hill. The original wagon road into the wilderness, which eventually came to Knoxville via roughly 11W. Thomas contracted with a gentleman by the name of Elijah Wallen. Anybody heard that name? Yep. Wallen's Ridge, up by Cumberland. A lot of Wallens over in the Smeadville area. But anyway, he contracted with Elijah Wallen, who happens to be Daniel Boone's axeman. He contracted with him to blaze and keep open a trail from here to Bean Station to Cumberland for trade purposes. And that is actually written into Thomas's General Ledger, which is, it's fabulous. His original store ledger from his store from 1782, leather-bound store ledger from 1782 to 94 is still intact. It's at the McClung Library in Knoxville. Lucy Gump, a number of years ago, quite a few years ago in fact, transcribed it. We have a transcription of it. And it is literally the who's who of not only who settled Tennessee, but west. Some fellow by the name of Sam Houston. A few people like that. They're all recorded in this book. And I read this and I'm just overwhelmed. What an entrepreneur. Incredible. The Rogers Tavern. Rogers Tavern was stocked out of the A&E place, all recorded in the ledger. So basically, it was the first franchise, which is just, that's how they grew. And so it's just phenomenal to watch. So anyway, I've been going over all this information, and I've got so much going on in my head. There's just so much to write about here in this specific location. I have a commercial. Go take a commercial break here. I have here, hot off the press, a booklet written by none other than the state historian, Dr. Carol Van West. And what does it say? Amy Farm. Dr. Carol Van West considers the Amy Farm the most significant revolutionary site in Tennessee. He talked with us several years ago about possibly doing the state sesquicentennial, practice that, sesquicentennial celebration on our farm. Because he can prove more revolutionary soldiers on our farm than any other location in Tennessee. That's your neighborhood, folks. That's where you live. Isn't that famous? Talk about history. You know, several years ago, our son was up from South Carolina, and we were going around visiting, and we went to Rocky Mount and then Elizabeth, to Davy Crockett birthplace and the Davy Crockett Tavern, and then we were coming our way back, and my son piped up and said, "Pop, do y'all realize that you have the real thing? You live in the real thing." The house built in 1780-81. Original house. In fact, there's some pictures in there of the house that Mary Amy grew up in. Mary Amy was the third child of Thomas Amy and his first wife, Alice Gale. My wife is the descendant of Tabitha, who was the oldest child. All these girls were born in Blaine County, North Carolina, and then they came up here by wagon in the cover of night when Lord Cornwallis made his push north in 1780, made his push north out of Charleston to squash the rebellion in the Carolinas, and Tom writes a letter to Caswell, and Caswell say, "Hey, saddle these folks up, give them troop escort, get them out of Dodge because they'll hang him." For multiple reasons. One of the reasons being that this fellow by the name of Francis Marion, anybody recognize that name? Swamp Fox. Guess where he got that name? Thomas Amy had a mill in the swamp in Blaine County, and he hid the general and his troops in his swamp. So there were multiple reasons for Cornwallis to get rid of Ammi. First off, he's a commissary officer. Secondly, he's hiding out this ruthless renegade named Marion. By the way, another French Huguenot. All of those guys ended up in the same areas, or they sought each other out, if you will. They were kindred spirits. So, those are the people that came this way. The real push into this area came after the Battle of Alamance, 71-72. That's when they really pushed over the Alps into the Mountain City area in what is now northeast Tennessee. The Battle of Alamance was Alamance County, North Carolina, is roughly where Chapel Hill is. Okay? Lord Tryon was the English general. No, he was the English lord. The English would find warlords in areas who already had control of the area, and they would make them their lord for that area, to govern that area, and they would just take part of the grift. And so Lord Tryon, the settlers in that area were complaining about the regulations and the taxation. And so they formed a committee meeting to meet with Tryon about doing something about that. Well, he had other plans. He showed up with the militia and fired on them. Said, disperse, get out of here. I'm not talking, bam, 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 shot a couple of them. They weren't armed. And so they said, oh God, we're out of here. And that was the push over into the settlement of the Watauga area. That's where the initial push into this area came from. The Watauga, I'm sure you're familiar with that, the Watauga Accord. The very first handwritten self-governance document in the world, which was used somewhat to form the Declaration and the Constitution. That's your people. That's this area. That's who we are. I am by marriage. I'm a Johnny-come-lately. I'm a German boy whose families were kicked out of Russia in the late 1800s. A Volga German is what we were called. Germans who were settled on the Volga River area by Catherine the Great, who was German. But anyway, when she died, they said, eh. So anyway, that's my lineage. But I'm just intrigued. The more we can't dig anymore without finding more. And we're overwhelmed with the information. It's just incredible. But anyway, Dr. Van West wrote this book and published it hot off the press. I just got it last week. So these are available for $5 a piece. Sorry, but they're available for $5 a piece. And it is the story done by Van West and his graduate students on Amy and the Amy family. So here it is available. There's some here. I've got tons. They'll be available out at the eatery once they get open. Another commercial. The eatery is scheduled to reopen first part of February, Lord willing, and the creek don't rise. So I have been diving back into information to redo the menu. So that's where I've been. Now, Thomas A. Meade and Hezekiah Hamlin, Hamlin County, were self-taught surveyors, and they surveyed out this square right here, 1786 roughly. And Thomas, as the senator from Western North Carolina, took that survey to Raleigh and chartered Rogersville, North Carolina. General Daniel Smith. Okay. Back up just a little bit. That was 1786 to 89, that time frame. In 1790, North Carolina gave all of their western holdings, this place included, back to the federal government to settle their war debt. The federal government appointed William Blount as the governor of this new territory, and they appointed a General Daniel Smith as the secretary. William Blount was famous, signer of the Declaration, Constitution, famous. General Daniel Smith happened to be a surveyor and cartographer. And guess what they needed to do? They needed to survey and map the new territory. Back then, the government did things that made sense. But anyway, so you can tell I'm very libertarian. But anyway, General Daniel Smith is staying in a stone home in the wilderness in 1791, corresponding, according to his personal journal, corresponding with Thomas Jefferson, who was the Secretary of State at the time, about the boundaries for the proposed new state. In 1791, he started this surveying process. 1795, he published the first map of the proposed state. Tennessee became a state in 1796. So So those things all happen right here. Aren't we lucky? Aren't we lucky? You know, God had to bring me screaming and kicking out of Colorado to get me here, but He found a way to do it. He broke me in 2008, and I said, "What you got for me, Lord?" So here we are. We're here for a purpose. And our purpose is to share this information. That place out there on the hill is not mine. I'm going to be kicking up daisies before too long. Somebody else. What's next? Who's next? What is the fate of the most significant revolutionary site in Tennessee? Subdivision? We have 2 boys, but neither one of them, they would love to move here, but this isn't where they make their living. There is no economy for them here. And so, good news is, I've got a better home awaiting. And this is just pasture. But while I'm here, we are going to do everything that we can to let everybody we can know how significant this place, area, particularly is. That's what it's all about. If you don't know your history, you don't know who you are, and you certainly don't know where you're going. So, questions? I confused you so thoroughly. Okay, these are available $5 a piece. We have many more. Will be available out at the restaurant when it opens up. So thank you so much for your time. Enjoy your meeting.
Thank you all. As you can see, historic preservation, it's up there. It's important. It's important for our area. Patriotism comes along. And our organization is all about patriotism, historic preservation, and education. And we want everyone to be as educated about our history as possible. But thank you for coming tonight. We thank Jay. Wasn't that wonderful? Let's give it another. I know.
Look, standing invitation. Give me a call when the weather warms up. And we'll jump in my golf cart and I'll tour you and show you on the property where the roads are, the trails are, where the original blacksmith was. By the way, one more anecdote. Amy Collins from ETSU did a fantastic archaeological survey of the property using LiDAR, sonar, and drones to look for additional building sites. And they have come up with some very, very interesting information. I mean, this is full-on History Channel stuff. It's absolutely incredible what they've done. The whole ETSU archaeological group, faculty and all, were out to the property digging and cooking and looking and pulling tapes, and it was a sight to watch. But anyway, she's published it. It's only 194 pages. So it's a real quick read. But anyway, it's just fantastic. And we're talking with her about how we can make that better for pickles. So that's just yes.
Jamie, is there any reference in that book to the ledger of where people actually pass through the meal? Through that, and that's good.
I'm not sure that it's in here, but I printed off
Yeah.
a stack of names that my wife has researched who are in the book. The book is available, again, we have that transcription available. So if you would like, yell at us and come look to see whose names in it. And he goes, we do a lot of church group tours. And we had a church group come through one time, and the pastor was all excited. He said, I think my ancestors came through here. And when they asked him, he said, well, well, he was the preacher. I said, oh, okay, all right, great. Well, let's look up in the book and see what Baptist preacher. So let's look in the book and see if he's in there. Well, sure enough, there he is. You want to know what he bought? Whiskey. Oh, no, I have snakes then. And you have to have snake bite medicine.
Medicinal purposes.